There comes a quiet moment in life when you realize that not every connection is meant to be kept. Not every person who enters your life is meant to stay. And sometimes the greatest act of strength is not holding on, but letting go. Words are never just random sounds that disappear into the air. They carry intention, awareness, and truth. When someone speaks to you, especially in moments of honesty or emotion, they reveal more than they may even realize. It is easy to focus only on actions and ignore words, thinking that actions matter more. But in reality, words and actions are deeply connected. What a person repeatedly says is often a direct reflection of how they think, how they feel, and how they perceive you. When a man speaks with respect, you can feel it. There is care in his tone, awareness in his choice of words, and a sense of responsibility in how he expresses himself. Even during disagreement, there is a boundary he does not cross. He may be upset. He may be frustrated, but he remains conscious of your dignity. This is not something forced. It comes naturally from someone who values you. But when someone does not value you, it also shows clearly, consistently, and often subtly at first. It might come in the form of dismissive comments, jokes that feel a little too sharp, or words that make you question yourself. Sometimes it is not even what is said, but how it is said. A careless tone, a lack of empathy, or an absence of consideration can speak louder than any sentence. Many people try to ignore this. They tell themselves that maybe it was said in anger. Maybe it was just a bad day. Maybe it didn't mean anything. And yes, everyone has moments where they say things they don't fully mean. But there is a difference between a rare mistake and a repeated pattern. When certain words or attitudes appear again and again, they are no longer accidents. They are reflections. The difficulty is that the heart often wants to protect the connection. It searches for excuses, softens the meaning of harsh words, and tries to reinterpret them in a way that feels less painful. This is how self-deception begins, not because you are weak, but because you are attached. You are not just hearing their words. You are hearing them through your hopes, your expectations, and your emotional investment. But truth does not disappear just because it is uncomfortable. If someone repeatedly says things that make you feel small, unimportant, or disrespected, it is not something to overlook. It is information. It is insight into how they see you and how they position themselves in the relationship. Words expose the inner world of a person, their level of maturity, their emotional awareness, and their capacity to care. There is also something deeper happening when you are on the receiving end of such words. At first, you notice them clearly. They feel sharp, unfamiliar, and uncomfortable. But over time, if you continue to stay and tolerate them, something begins to shift. You start normalizing them. What once felt wrong begins to feel expected. And slowly, without realizing it, your standard begins to lower. This is how self-respect erodes, not in one moment, but in many small moments that go unchallenged. Each time you ignore a hurtful word, you send a quiet message to yourself that this is acceptable. Not because you truly believe it is, but because you are choosing to stay despite it. And this is why awareness is so important. You must learn to listen, not just to what is being said, but to how it makes you feel within. Your reaction is not something to dismiss, it is a signal. If something feels off, if something feels heavy, if something lingers in your mind longer than it should, there is a reason for it. Words reveal what a person may try to hide through actions or temporary kindness. They are glimpses into truth that cannot be maintained through pretense forever. And the more you pay attention, the more clearly you begin to see not who you wish they were, but who they are. Ignoring red flags rarely feels like a conscious decision. It often begins quietly, almost invisibly. The first time something feels off, you notice it. There is a slight discomfort, a hesitation, a question that forms in your mind. But instead of staying with that feeling, you move away from it. You explain it, justify it, or minimize it. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. And in that moment, something subtle begins to shift within you. Self-respect is deeply connected to awareness. It is the ability to recognize what feels right and what does not, and to honor that recognition. But when you start ignoring red flags, you interrupt this process. You begin to override your own perception. Instead of trusting what you feel, you start trusting the version of reality that is easier to accept. At first, this might seem harmless. You might think you are being understanding, patient, or emotionally mature. You might even take pride in your ability to not overreact. But there is a difference between emotional control and self-dismissal. When you consistently silence your inner voice, you are not becoming stronger. You are becoming disconnected from yourself. Every red flag you ignore leaves an impression. It tells your mind that your boundaries are flexible, that your comfort is negotiable, and that your feelings are not urgent. And the more this happens, the more natural it becomes. What once required effort to ignore, to justify, to overlook, eventually becomes automatic. This is how your inner voice begins to weaken. It does not disappear all at once. It fades gradually. The clarity you once had becomes clouded. The confidence you once felt in your own judgment starts to dissolve. You begin to second-guess yourself more often, not because you lack intelligence, but because you have trained yourself not to trust what you see and feel. There is also a psychological weight that comes with this pattern. When something feels wrong but is constantly ignored, it does not simply vanish. It stays within you, creating tension. You may not always be able to name it, but you can feel it. It shows up as overthinking, as anxiety, as emotional exhaustion. You start analyzing small details, trying to make sense of things that should have been acknowledged much earlier. At the same time, your tolerance increases. Things that once felt unacceptable begin to feel normal. This does not mean they have become right. It simply means you have adapted to them. And adaptation, in this context, is not growth, it is survival. You are adjusting yourself to fit a situation that is not aligned with your well-being. Another important aspect is the impact on your identity. Self-respect is not just about how others treat you, it is about how you treat yourself. When you repeatedly ignore what hurts you, you start to lose a sense of alignment with who you are. There is a quiet inner conflict between what you feel and what you allow. And over time, this conflict can make you feel disconnected, as if you are no longer fully grounded in yourself. It becomes harder to draw the line. The moment where you should say, "This is not okay," becomes unclear. Not because the situation is complex, but because your internal clarity has been compromised. You have practiced ignoring, so recognizing becomes more difficult. And yet, even in this state, a part of you still knows. It may be quieter now, less confident, but it has not disappeared. There is still a sense, however faint, that something is not right. The challenge is not that you cannot see the red flags. It is that you have become used to looking away from them. Rebuilding self-respect begins with reversing this pattern. It starts with acknowledging what you have been ignoring without judgment, without blame. Just seeing it clearly. Because the moment you allow yourself to see without distortion, you begin to reconnect with that inner voice that was always there, waiting to be heard. Respect is not something that is established through words alone. It is shaped through behavior, through consistency, and most importantly, through boundaries. Boundaries are not walls meant to push people away. They are quiet expressions of self-awareness. They define what is acceptable to you and what is not. And whether you realize it or not, every time you respond to a situation, you are teaching others how to treat you. Most people think respect comes from demanding it, from explaining it, or from asking for it repeatedly. But respect that is asked for without action often goes unnoticed. Not because the other person is unaware, but because there is no consequence attached to crossing the line. When words say one thing, but actions allow another, people naturally follow what is being allowed. This is where boundaries become essential. They are not loud or aggressive. They do not require long explanations or emotional reactions. In fact, the most powerful boundaries are often the quietest ones. They are shown through decisions, through what you accept, what you reject, and what you choose to walk away from. When someone says something that disrespects you, there is a moment of choice. You can ignore it, laugh it off, or brush it aside to keep the peace. And many people do this because they want to avoid conflict. They want to maintain harmony. But in doing so, they send a message, not just to the other person, but to themselves, that this behavior is tolerable. On the other hand, when you respond with awareness, everything changes. This does not mean reacting with anger or creating unnecessary drama. It means acknowledging, either through calm words or through your actions, that a line has been crossed. Sometimes this is as simple as not engaging further. Sometimes it is creating distance. And sometimes it is choosing to leave entirely. People are always observing, even when it seems like they are not. They notice what you tolerate. They notice what you ignore. And over time, they adjust their behavior accordingly, not always consciously, but naturally. If there are no clear boundaries, there is no clear limit. And without limits, respect becomes inconsistent. It is important to understand that boundaries are not about controlling others. You cannot control what someone says or does. But you can control what you allow into your space. This is where your power lies, not in changing someone, but in deciding how you respond to them. There is also a level of self-trust involved in setting boundaries. When you honor your limits, you reinforce a sense of stability within yourself. You begin to feel more grounded, more clear, and more aligned. But when you ignore your own boundaries, even silently, you create inner confusion. You start to question yourself, wondering why something feels wrong, even though you said nothing. Over time, consistent boundaries create a pattern, and patterns shape perception. When people see that you do not tolerate disrespect, they become more mindful in how they approach you. Not out of fear, but out of recognition. They understand that there are certain lines that cannot be crossed. At the same time, boundaries act as a filter. They naturally distance those who are unwilling to respect you, and they create space for those who are capable of doing so. This is not something you force. It happens as a result of your consistency. One of the challenges people face is the fear of losing someone by setting boundaries. They worry that speaking up or stepping back will push the other person away. And sometimes it does. But what remains is the question: is a connection without respect something worth holding on to? When you think about it deeply, boundaries are not just about protecting yourself from others. They are about maintaining your relationship with yourself. They ensure that you do not abandon your own values in order to keep someone else comfortable. And in the end, respect is not built through what you say you deserve. It is built through what you consistently allow into your life and what you choose quietly but firmly to walk away from. Hope is a powerful force. It allows you to see possibility where others see limitation. It gives you the strength to stay during difficult moments and the patience to believe that things can improve. In many areas of life, hope is what keeps you moving forward. But in relationships, when not balanced with awareness, hope can quietly turn into something that keeps you stuck. When you care about someone, you do not see them only as they are. You also see who they could become. You notice small moments of kindness, brief changes in behavior, or words that sound promising, and you hold on to them. These moments begin to represent potential. And that potential becomes the reason you stay. You tell yourself that maybe they are just going through something. Maybe they are not fully aware of their actions. Maybe with time, patience, and understanding, they will change. This way of thinking feels compassionate, even loving. But there is a subtle danger in it. You are no longer relating to the reality of the person. You are relating to an imagined future version of them. This creates a gap between what is happening and what you believe could happen. And within that gap, confusion begins to grow. When their words or actions hurt you, you feel it clearly. But almost immediately, hope steps in to soften the impact. It reminds you of the good moments, the promises, the glimpses of change. And slowly, your perception becomes divided. You are no longer seeing things as they are. You are filtering them through expectation. The mind becomes very skilled at protecting this hope. It starts creating explanations for behavior that does not align with respect or care. You may begin to think that if you communicate better, they will understand. If you are more patient, they will improve. If you give them more time, things will shift. And while growth and change are possible for anyone, they cannot be forced through your effort alone. Change is a personal decision. It requires awareness, responsibility, and consistent action from the other person. Without these, hope becomes one-sided. You continue to invest emotionally, believing that your presence will inspire transformation. But in reality, you may just be adapting yourself to a situation that is not changing at its core. There is also an emotional attachment to the idea of not giving up. Walking away can feel like failure. It can feel like you did not try hard enough, or that you are abandoning something that still has a chance. So you stay longer, trying to prove to yourself or to them that you are capable of making it work. But staying out of hope alone often comes at a cost. You begin to compromise your boundaries. You tolerate things you once said you never would. And each time you do, you move a little further away from your own center. Not because you do not value yourself, but because you are focused on preserving the possibility of the relationship. Hope can also make you ignore patterns. You may notice repeated behavior, repeated words, repeated situations that leave you feeling the same way. But instead of recognizing them as patterns, you treat them as isolated incidents. You separate each moment from the next, allowing hope to reset your expectations every time. This cycle can continue for a long time. You experience disappointment, then reassurance, then hope again. And within this cycle, you remain emotionally invested, even when the reality in front of you does not truly change. There is a quiet exhaustion that comes with this. Not always visible, not always acknowledged, but present. It is the weight of holding on to something that is uncertain, something that requires constant emotional adjustment. At some point, clarity begins to emerge. Not because hope disappears, but because reality becomes too consistent to ignore. You start to see that what you are waiting for is not happening, at least not in the way you imagined. And in that moment, you are faced with a deeper question. Are you staying because things are good, or because you are hoping they will become good? Walking away is often misunderstood. From the outside, it can look like giving up, like a lack of patience, or even like weakness. People may assume that leaving means you are not strong enough to stay, not committed enough to endure, or not willing to fight for the relationship. But this perception only exists when strength is defined as persistence at any cost. True strength is not about how long you can tolerate something that hurts you. It is about how clearly you can see when something is no longer aligned with your well-being, and how courageously you can act on that clarity. There is a quiet difficulty in walking away that many people do not see. It is not just about leaving a person. It is about leaving behind familiarity, emotional attachment, shared memories, and the version of the future you once believed in. You are not only stepping away from what is, but also from what you hoped it could be. And that is what makes it heavy. Staying is often easier in the short term. It allows you to avoid the discomfort of separation, the uncertainty of being alone, and the fear of starting over. It keeps things predictable, even if that predictability comes with pain. Walking away, on the other hand, brings you face to face with the unknown, and the human mind naturally resists uncertainty. But there is another side to this. While staying may feel easier now, it often creates a deeper, longer, lasting discomfort. The kind that builds slowly over time. The kind that affects how you see yourself, how you feel about your worth, and how much of yourself you are willing to compromise to maintain a connection. Walking away interrupts this pattern. It is a decision that says, quietly but firmly, that your well-being matters, that your peace is not something to be negotiated, that your self-respect is not dependent on someone else's behavior. This does not mean that walking away is free of pain. In fact, it often brings a different kind of pain, the pain of letting go, of missing someone, of questioning whether you made the right choice. There may be moments where you look back and remember the good, where you feel the pull to return to what is familiar. This is natural. It does not mean your decision was wrong. It means you are human. Strength, in this context, is not the absence of these feelings. It is the ability to feel them fully, without allowing them to control your actions. It is choosing not to go back to something that has already shown you it cannot give you what you need, even when part of you wants to hold on. There is also a deep sense of clarity that comes with walking away. Not immediately, but gradually. As you create distance, you begin to see things more objectively. The confusion that once surrounded you starts to settle. You begin to understand the patterns, the words, the moments that you once questioned. And with this understanding comes a stronger connection to yourself. You start to rebuild trust in your own judgment. You begin to recognize that you are capable of making difficult decisions, not out of impulse, but out of awareness. This realization becomes a source of inner strength, something that stays with you beyond the situation itself. Walking away is also an act of self-responsibility. It is acknowledging that while you cannot control another person's behavior, you are responsible for your own choices. You are responsible for where you stay, what you accept, and how you respond to what you experience. It is easy to remain in a situation and hope it changes. It is much harder to step out of it and accept things as they are. This acceptance is not passive, it is active. It requires you to face reality without distortion, without denial, and without the comfort of illusion. And within that acceptance, there is a quiet power. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. A power that comes from knowing that you are no longer abandoning yourself just to hold on to someone else. Self-respect is often spoken about as if it is something separate from love, as if the two exist independently. But in reality, self-respect is the foundation upon which any healthy form of love is built. Without it, what feels like love can slowly turn into attachment, dependence, or even quiet suffering. When you do not prioritize self-respect, you begin to shape your behavior around maintaining the connection, rather than maintaining your inner balance. You start adjusting your words, your reactions, and even your standards, not because it feels right, but because you are trying to avoid losing the other person. And in doing so, you move further away from your authentic self. At first, these adjustments may seem small. You let certain comments pass. You ignore moments that make you uncomfortable. You give the benefit of the doubt more often than you question what is happening. But over time, these small compromises begin to accumulate, and slowly, they form a pattern where your needs, your feelings, and your boundaries become secondary. Love in its healthy form does not require you to silence yourself. It does not ask you to tolerate what hurts you or to shrink who you are in order to keep the peace. Real connection creates space for both people to exist fully, without fear of being diminished. But when self-respect is missing, this balance cannot exist. You may find yourself constantly trying to prove your worth, not directly, but through your actions, being more patient, more understanding, more forgiving. You may believe that if you give enough, if you stay long enough, the other person will eventually see your value. But when self-respect is not present, this effort often goes unnoticed or becomes expected. There is a subtle shift that happens when you place love above self-respect. You begin to measure your value based on how the other person treats you. If they are attentive, you feel secure. If they are distant or dismissive, you begin to question yourself. Your sense of stability becomes dependent on something external, something you cannot fully control. This creates emotional instability. Not because you are weak, but because your foundation is not rooted within you. You are trying to build something meaningful on a base that is constantly shifting. And no matter how much effort you put in, it will always feel uncertain. Self-respect changes this dynamic. It brings you back to yourself. It reminds you that your worth is not something to be earned through someone else's recognition. It is something you carry within, regardless of how others behave. When you operate from this place, your decisions become clearer. You no longer feel the need to chase validation or to hold on to situations that do not align with your values. You begin to recognize that love is not just about how much you feel for someone, but also about how you are treated in return. And if that treatment does not reflect care, consideration, and respect, then what you are holding on to may not be love in its true form. Choosing self-respect does not mean you stop loving. It means you love with awareness. You love without abandoning yourself. You allow connection, but not at the cost of your dignity. This creates a different kind of strength, one that is steady, grounded, and not easily shaken by external behavior. There may be moments where this choice feels difficult, where you question whether you are being too firm, too distant, or too protective. But these doubts often come from old patterns, from a time when you believed that love required sacrifice of the self. Over time, as you continue to choose self-respect, something begins to shift. You feel more aligned, more clear, more at peace with your decisions. Not because everything becomes perfect, but because you are no longer in conflict with yourself. And in that alignment, you begin to understand that love without self-respect is incomplete. It may feel intense, it may feel consuming, but it lacks the stability and depth that come from being rooted in your own sense of worth. In the end, everything comes back to a simple but often overlooked truth. You cannot build something meaningful while abandoning yourself in the process. No connection, no matter how strong it feels, is worth the quiet erosion of your dignity, your peace, and your sense of self. There will always be reasons to stay, memories, emotions, hope, and the fear of letting go. But there is a deeper responsibility you carry, one that cannot be ignored forever. The responsibility to listen to yourself, to recognize when something no longer feels right, to honor the part of you that seeks respect, not just from others, but from within. Not every painful moment is a sign to leave, but repeated patterns, consistent words, and the way someone makes you feel over time, these are not things to overlook. They are messages, and the longer you ignore them, the more disconnected you become from your own truth. Choosing to walk away is not about proving anything to anyone. It is not about winning or losing. It is about alignment. It is about no longer forcing yourself to stay where you feel unseen, unheard, or unvalued. It is about understanding that your presence is meaningful, and it should be placed where it is recognized, not questioned. There is strength in patience, but there is also strength in knowing when patience turns into self-neglect. There is strength in love, but there is even greater strength in loving yourself enough to not accept less than you deserve. So when the moment comes, when the words are clear, when the feeling is undeniable, when the pattern reveals itself, do not ignore it. Do not silence your awareness just to maintain what is familiar. Stand still. Be honest with yourself. And if needed, have the courage to walk away, not out of anger, but out of respect for the person you are becoming.